Hi there, Waltoneers. I'm Jack, and this is a special live edition of DSNY Newscast, a DSNY Newscast live stream. Now, today we received some news, which is, there's no other way to say it, it's bombshell news, and it's on a topic which you probably noticed, I've stayed away from in recent months. And I just want to address this right from the get-go. I've stayed away from it because, in my opinion, I have seen it as very much a manufactured media melodrama, and I just didn't want to give any sort of promotion to political candidates who are potentially running for president in the next year, and I didn't want to use my YouTube channel, which is about Disney, as a platform to do so. So I've stayed away from this for that reason, and to be honest, this whole issue involving DeSantis and Disney, I did a video on it last year, in April of last year. By the way, just want to get this out of the way also at the beginning. Been slightly under the weather recently, got a little bit of a cough and a little bit of a cold as well. Had a bit of a head cold over the weekend. So basically, when it comes to this whole topic, I've stayed away from it for that reason. And that is, I didn't want to give any free promotion to, any extra free promotion for a candidate who is potentially going to be running for president. And I just saw it very much as the political stunt that it has been. The fight of Disney and DeSantis and this whole war between the two of them, and DeSantis, trying to drag Disney into it. I just saw it as, I don't want to get involved in this political fray, to be honest. But today it's different because Disney has decided to, at long last, sue DeSantis. And it's not over the bill that started this whole thing last year, that's called the Parental Rights in Education Act, or as the critics have called it, the Don't Say Gay bill. It's not about that. The lawsuit that was filed today is filed with the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Florida. And it's about freedom of speech and retaliation. And it's about how DeSantis has targeted Disney. Now, I'm sure many people here will have a varied amount of views across the political spectrum. And no matter where you stand, I think we've got to get some of the facts straight, which is constitutional facts. And I know how rich that sounds coming from a Brit. I am British. But when it comes to one of the basic, most simplistic core beliefs and of America, and that is freedom of speech, Disney was entitled to give their freedom of speech last April. There's no way around it. Whether you agree or disagree with what they said, that's a different issue altogether. One I'm not going to get into. But Disney, when they said what they said, they were entitled to say what they said, and that's freedom of speech. And it's one of the best aspects of democracy and a civilized society, is being able to listen to one another and disagree with each other. But when it comes to the issue as of recently, DeSantis has gone after Disney because he did not enjoy or did not agree with Disney's stance on his political policy or the legislation that was passed. Now, personally, do I think that Disney could have handled this whole situation better last year? Yes. Yes, they definitely could. Disney could have easily handled this whole situation better. Last year, it went from not saying anything to then saying something and then going so far the other way. It was mishandled across the board. But I do think that Disney has stayed relatively quiet this past year. Except for when they've been asked on certain issues. But a lot of the media coverage has been about the politicians involved, the lawmakers in Florida, and the governor. And Disney's kept relatively quiet on the matter. They've done things, but they've kept it more behind closed doors and private. So that's where I stand on that. I want to get into this lawsuit. I know it's a very unusual one because this is, the clue is in the name. It's DSNY Newscast. I never thought 6 years ago when I started this that this is where we'd end up. 6 years later on the channel having to discuss a lawsuit between Disney and the state of Florida. Not the state of Florida, it's not the state of Florida, sorry. It's the Florida Governor, Ron DeSantis. And yeah, so when it comes to that, I didn't expect this was going to be the root of the channel. But I do want to get into some of it. So Disney said, as part of their argument for their lawsuit, they said, I'm quoting this, by the way, from the lawsuit. It says, a targeted campaign of government retaliation, orchestrated at every step by Governor DeSantis, as punishment for Disney's protected speech, now threatens Disney's business operations, jeopardizes its economic future in the region, and violates its constitutional rights. And the reason why this has happened today is because, as you may be aware, the Reedy Creek was not fully dissolved back in February. Originally that was the plan, but it basically turned into the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District. And then, obviously, you've probably followed it along on other channels. People have been doing a great job of covering it in terms of blogs out there, YouTube channels, mainstream media have been covering this. So I've stayed away from it for that reason, because it's been getting enough traction and enough saturation. But when it comes to what's happened, the constitutional rights is at the heart of this whole lawsuit. And whether you agree or disagree with what Disney said, you can't dispute the fact that an individual company has the right to say what they want. It's freedom of speech and freedom of expression. And they can take a stand and make a statement if they want to do so. And that's what they did. And so what this lawsuit is saying is that because they did that, DeSantis and the Florida lawmakers, the Republican lawmakers, have decided to punish Disney. And they've actually got quotes in this lawsuit saying that the lawmaker who helped pass one of the bills even did explicitly say, he said that they are targeting one company and they are targeting the Walt Disney Company. And so when it comes to this whole issue of freedom of speech and First Amendment, I think personally this should be a open and shut case, open and closed case, because there's no other way to really look at it. I'm not going to really get involved in both sidism here. I know, that oftentimes you should, because it's stay neutral in the middle. But both sidism here doesn't necessarily work, because we've got the facts, which is there's the Constitution and there's freedom of speech. And a company like Disney is entitled to make a statement if they'd like. And then, let the consumers decide. If the consumers don't agree, then that's what happens in free enterprise and capitalism. But to do what has happened, which is take control away from Disney. And by the way, the Reedy Creek Improvement District was created back in the 1960s. And I know a lot is being made about this special tax district and, the Reedy Creek Improvement District from that standpoint. And why should Disney have access to this special thing that no other company has? Well, Disney also has 27,000 acres of property in Florida in one central location. And what the Reedy Creek Improvement District is about, it's about a municipality to operate the roads, the sewage, the electricity, all the workings to keep a massive area, which, I can't remember the exact statistic. I think it's like the size of Manhattan, the total size of the area that Disney own. And, so 27,000 acres, you've got a lot of space there that you've got to operate. And when the new board took over, they said that they were disappointed that they're going to be left to only take care of the roads and deal with the sewage and the infrastructure. But to that, I say that's what they're meant to do. That's what the job is. That's what the district is about. It's about approving permits. It's about dealing with building regulations and developmental agreements and stuff like that. And so, to think that these board members of the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District, I know that's one hell of a mouthful, can just do what they want in terms of, trying to influence the Disney Company. Well, that would be being part of the board of directors at Disney. They are not part of the board of directors at Disney. They are overseeing the Walt Disney World property, and that's what they're meant to do. And that's part of the job, is to look after the infrastructure of Walt Disney World. So, I think it's a very interesting perspective. I do want to come over to some of the comments now. But first of all, let's just go to a new scene. I'm just going to also pull up, give me a second. I'm just going to pull up that, and then I'm going to go to a new scene just to show you the lawsuit that was filed. So it says Walt Disney Parks and Resorts US Inc., which is obviously the company that Walt Disney World is owned by, is filing this lawsuit against Ronald DeSantis, and all the other officials and all the people named there are members of the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District. And I'll leave a link actually in the description. I haven't done it yet, but what's very interesting is this part here, the prayer for relief. And I will scroll all the way down there, and we'll talk about this, because this is basically what Disney want to see as a result of this. They want to see resolved. So here, I don't like saying run scene there. Let me just change that out there. There we go. Right. It says, plaintiff respectfully requests that the court grant the following relief. Declare that the legislative declaration is unlawful and unenforceable because it abrogates Disney's rights in violation of the contracts clause. Declare that the legislation declaration is unlawful taking of Disney's property rights without payment or of just compensation in violation of the takings clause. So you can see, if you read through all of these here, C, D, E, F, you can see that what Disney's seeking is a rebuke, basically, of the laws that they've just passed in the board. I know it gets very complicated, but the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District Board. They're trying to overturn that, basically, and say it's unenforceable and unlawful what they're trying to do. And that's because the board today has voted to say that they have superior authority over what Disney previously passed with Reedy Creek and Disney. Now, you can say that Disney were, Disney and Reedy Creek are one and the same. It's the same thing, and how can Disney govern itself? But at the end of the day, they have people there that know what they're talking about in terms of municipality and take great care in looking after the district. And if you ever go to Walt Disney World, you should really care about the Reedy Creek Improvement District, and you should really care about who runs it, because they take care of the roads. They take care of all of the infrastructure that makes up Walt Disney World. And if the roads and other things start to fall into disrepair, then that endangers the guests. And I don't feel that that is a particularly good place to be at, defending a board where, when you look at the new appointees that DeSantis has appointed to the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District Board, a lot of them don't have. There's 5 new members, and none of them, from what I can tell, have much experience with municipalities and dealing with infrastructure issues like that. So we're at this point now where I don't want this to go on. This is 15 minutes so far, this live stream. I don't really want this live stream to go on for, an hour, even over an hour, anything like that. I'll try and keep it shorter. But I do want to turn it over to you on the questions that you have. And I'll speak about the first one here, which is monorail upkeep inspection by Jonathan. Now, that's a very interesting one, because I'll put it back on the screen, actually. Because obviously they've just passed a new piece of legislation that says that now it targets Disney specifically, but without necessarily saying Disney, but it goes right down to just Disney. And they're saying that basically the monorails need to be inspected. And it also comes down to the agricultural secretary for Florida overseeing ride inspections. Now, the agricultural department also oversee ride inspections of state fairs. And, you know, if you've been to Disney, you know that Disney's no state fair. It's a completely different, more complicated process. I'm just going to... And so when it comes to Disney and the state fair, sorry, my throat is really bugging me up a second. Let me just do this. Sorry. Yeah, I'm muted for that a second. But when it comes to the ride inspections and things like that, the types of rides that Disney have, they're way more complicated and way more complex and than just a state fair type of ride. And so Disney doing these kinds of ride inspections, they're much more thorough. They know what the actual ride consists of. You know, you can't compare a trackless ride system to a very basic, you know, fun wheel that just gets moved around state fairs. It's a very different type of ride inspection we're talking about here. And to oversimplify it and make it seem like, you know, oh, state of Florida can just take on the ride inspections. Well, Universal aren't going to get ride inspections like that. It's specifically singling out Disney. You can talk about a level playing field, but, you know, if there was a level playing field, it would be Universal, SeaWorld, and Busch Gardens all getting the same type of ride inspections that's being discussed for Disney, which are not being discussed for those theme parks. So it's specifically singling out Disney, and that's what's at the core of this entire lawsuit. It's not about the piece of legislation last year. This whole argument comes down to a simple constitutional matter, which is, do companies have freedom of speech? And this was settled many years ago, back in the 1970s, I believe, that they do have freedom of speech. They do have, as an entity, as an individual entity, they can make a statement, and their rights are upheld within the Constitution as well. And so, if this thing goes further, if this thing goes to the northern, let me just pull it up again. Give me a second. Give me a sec. If it goes, which it is going to go to the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Florida. I raised the point on Twitter. It depends what type of judge this gets assigned to, and is it going to be a judge who's a political appointee who is a friend of DeSantis, or is it going to be a political appointee who isn't a friend of DeSantis, or is it just going to be someone who tries to call it down the middle and looks at it for what it should be, which is the black and white issue here. On paper, it's a black and white issue of the Constitution, and that's the only way to look at it. And it's troubling what's gone on with Reedy Creek and trying to take control of Disney, basically, because they said something like that, said something which a politician disagreed with. And in many ways, the actions of trying to take control of a company because they disagreed with your political stance, it's something which is fairly, authoritarian to do. And it's something that we haven't really ever seen in America before of this ilk. So it's an interesting way of going about it. And I'm not going to continue to make any sort of, try and sway this in the political direction in any way. But I'm also not going to get involved in both sides. And when it comes to how this whole thing's going to be shaking out, it's going to go to the US District Court. And if Disney don't get the result they want, they could easily take this higher and higher. They could take it higher to the Supreme Court if they wanted to. Because they do know that they've been sat there for over a year. I'm just going to have a quick drink. Give me a sec. They've been sat there for over a year, gaining all this evidence that all these lawmakers and DeSantis has said that, this is retaliation. We are going to go after Disney. And so they know they've got a pretty solid case. I'm just going to mute it. So yeah, it's probably, this whole news topic has come on the wrong day, to be honest. I am ill at the moment, so I'm trying to soldier through for all of you. But it's going to be interesting which judge gets assigned to this case. Now, there has been a piece of information come out there by Pixar, and it is saying that the judge for this court case is supposedly going to be an Obama appointee judge, which probably doesn't bode well for DeSantis, if we're being honest, in this whole court case. And hopefully, because this judge in particular has a lot of experience with First Amendment lawsuits. And with this First Amendment lawsuit, this one is one of the most cut and dry First Amendment lawsuits that should be around. And if you've witnessed anything going on in the past few months, you've seen Disney get targeted with all this. You can say that you disagree with Disney, and you can say you disagree with what they've said if you want to. Personally, I don't. I think that they could have handled it a lot better, and they should have come out. They should have handled this more behind closed doors at the beginning. But that's Chapek for you. He didn't have any he didn't really feel like he had much political finesse or even knowing how to handle public relations very well, corporate communications and stuff like that. And so the whole thing blew up into a much bigger thing that had to. But at the end of the day, I've made my thoughts clear on this. If you've been following me on Twitter, you've probably seen. But I'm not going to do... I'm doing this live stream right now because I wanted to just set some of the records straight to some degree. But I do also want to bring you guys into this whole thing. Hi there, Bonnie. Thank you for the update. It should be interesting. Here we go. I'm going to try and veer away from overtly political statements. So Brookie says here, the world feels broken when even theme parks fall into the divisive US politics. There is no escaping all this politics. Yeah, to be honest, Brookie, that sums up somewhat of my thoughts of, I just didn't think that 6 years ago I would end up here talking about something like this. Then again, I also didn't think we'd end up having to cover a global pandemic. But, that's the way things go. But, yeah, so I'll try and read through some of these. Give me a second. There's a lot of comments coming in. There's a lot of comments. And a lot of them are very... offhand Disney's popped in here. Says, hey Jack, love the stream. Do you think if this goes Disney's way, it could lead to a re-implementation of the Reedy Creek Improvement District as we know it before? That's a fantastic question there, darling. By the way, big shout out to Offhand Disney. I watch his videos on a regular basis, and they're really good. Darling does bring up some very interesting topics that you wouldn't think could be as interesting as they are. And he takes them and puts a unique spin on them and makes them very interesting. So big shout out. Go check out his stuff over on Offhand Disney. But yeah, so will this, if this goes Disney's way, if this lawsuit goes Disney's way, will it lead to a re-implementation of the Reedy Creek Improvement District? And the simple answer to that is, judging from what the lawsuit says, no. It won't lead to a re-implementation of the Reedy Creek Improvement District immediately. What it will do is it's specifically about trying to overturn, or not overturn, mark as unlawful and unenforceable the piece of legislation which is trying to strip the developmental agreement from Disney. So early this year, well, not early this year, it started last year, but then early this year, Disney, you may have heard about this whole King Charles III clause, where Disney said 21 years after the last, I'm just going to cough, I know that's not very pleasant, So Disney said basically that they had an agreement that they publicly notified in the Orlando Sentinel, and they publicly advertised this arrangement, and they said the Reedy Creek Board is going to give control over Disney's property, for 30 odd years, and this is going to be in place with the King Charles III clause, which basically meant 21 years after the last surviving descendant of King Charles III dies. So it's just a way for them to measure out, infinity, basically. It's a good way to measure it out, because if you just said forever, forever, you can't actually measure that as a period of time. And in law, you need to measure it. So they've basically said, this big, long stretch, it's basically saying it gives control over to Disney over their property. And yeah, so they did that. But now the new board, the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District Board, DeSantis' board, has nullified that agreement, has decided to strip that agreement of all meaning. And what this lawsuit is basically saying is that, no, you can't do that. It's unenforceable and unlawful what you're doing. And more than that, it's also a breach of freedom of speech. You've gone after us because it's a retaliation. And that's just basically the way it is. I could go on and on and on and just reiterate the same point over and over, but I don't really see much of a point of that. We're already at 26 minutes. I'm aware that some people may disagree with what this stance right now, but if you do disagree with the whole lawsuit with Disney and you think that, Disney shouldn't have special powers and stuff like that, what I will ask you is the simple question of, it was in place for over 50 years. And Disney were doing a fine job for over 50 years. Why is it that it all of a sudden came crashing down and it needed to be stripped away? Is it because Disney were doing such a terrible job with Reedy Creek Improvement District? Or was it because there was some sort of political motivation to do so? And that is basically what the lawsuit is saying. It's saying that there's retaliation towards Disney, and they've went after Reedy Creek for that reason. Now, the actual district was given to Disney by a Republican governor back in the 1960s, and also Disney's not the only special district in Florida. There's so many special districts. You should go look them up. There's thousands of special districts in Florida, and one of the biggest ones apart from Disney and Reedy Creek is actually the Villages in Florida. And the lawmakers targeting Reedy Creek have been very specific to not make it broader language, which could rope in and pull in a couple other districts to try and make it look fairer that they're going after all of them. Instead, they're carving out Disney and Reedy Creek, because if they target the Villages in Florida, well, they've got other reasons to not target certain areas. So they're specifically targeting just Disney. Now, a lot of people will say, well, Universal don't have a special district, so why should Disney have a special district? Well, Universal also doesn't have the amount of land that Disney has, and the operation of that land. And when you go back 50 years of them operating it and all the entanglements of the complexity of running that district, just to strip it away now, it's plain and simple why it's happening. And so I think Disney have a very strong case here, and clearly they think they have. And to be honest, Disney's got an army of lawyers, and it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. I do know that the Central Florida Tourism Board have already said that they're going to they've already said that they're going to use taxpayers or raise taxes or something to try and pay these legal bills, these legal fees, to try and to take on this lawsuit, which I don't think is a very popular policy. Other business owners at Disney Springs have turned up to the district office today and said their displeasure. Made it clear their displeasure of this whole battle between the state of Florida, or more specifically DeSantis and DeSantis's allies, versus Disney. And it's a very sad situation that we've got to right now. especially when you consider that Disney is a company that, employs 75,000 people in Florida, in Central Florida, and supports way more than that, because obviously it's not just Disney. And by the way, I also want to address another point, which is all this talk about Disney, Disney should go to North Carolina, Disney should go to South Carolina, Disney should go to Colorado. No, it's not that simple. It's not like Disney can just up and move. It's not like Walt Disney World can just pack them all onto the back of a trailer and take them to the nearby state. It doesn't work like that. So all of these other states coming out saying, "Hey, Florida, that's all political maneuvering as well." That's just it's silly talk, really, because they're just saying, "Hey, if you don't like Florida, maybe you should come over here." Well, Disney's not going to up and move and build 4 new theme parks in a new state immediately. They just can't do that. And so any talk of that, it's a bit silly, to be honest. But yeah, so I just wanted to deal with that as well. But when it comes to this oversight board being appointees that DeSantis has appointed, one was a member who, this has all been reported. I'm not the first to report any of this. It's been reported by all sorts of local outlets, But one of the appointees was somebody who donated to DeSantis's campaign fund, I think $50,000 or so. Another one, their husband is the chair for the GOP in Florida. And so it's not a matter of the fact that they are politically appointed, because obviously they're politically appointed. It's DeSantis. DeSantis is appointing people who it's a political stunt. But when it comes to appointing them, there's no merit for why they should be appointed. It's not like they have experience in dealing with municipalities. And the complexity of road safety and road infrastructure and maintenance and sewage works and all this other stuff that goes on within the Reedy Creek Improvement District. So, it's a very complicated issue, and I've stayed away from all of these videos, and I might continue to, I don't know. But those are my thoughts on this whole matter, and hopefully that's cleared up some of the you're probably wondering where's Jack been on this whole topic, and some of you may disagree with me, and that's the way it goes, isn't it? So, but we live in a civilized society. We live in a democracy. We all have freedom of speech. We all have our own thoughts on matters. Those are my thoughts on this. I respect other people's opinions. I don't really monitor or I think I've got like 10 people blocked on Twitter, and that's it, really. I think maybe 10 or 12 people blocked on Twitter, and that's it. And so I do believe in freedom of speech, and I do believe in freedom of expression, and that's what this whole lawsuit is about. Someone just said here, I want to bring up this point. They said, you don't want to go down the line of political appointments of people without related experience. There's very much down both sides. Yeah, well, you want people with experience in these roles, and that's what the point I'm trying to make is the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District. These people, they did say, one of the members did say that, all we've got control over now is just the roads and stuff. And it's just like, well, that is the job. That's the job. I don't know what else you think the Reedy Creek Improvement District gets to do. They don't get to design rides. They don't get to decide Disney's, corporate policy. They don't get to do any of that. It's the Reedy Creek Improvement District. It's a municipality district. It's a special taxing district as well, but it's also a municipality. Anyway, so that's where I stand on all of this. I don't really want to go on for too much longer. So thank you for stopping by today on the live stream. And maybe I'll be back if more develops on this issue. And when there's a lawsuit, when this lawsuit goes to court, potentially I could see this maybe getting settled outside of court. I know DeSantis is currently in Asia right now. I think he's in Japan or somewhere over there, and so he's out of the country at the moment. But I could see this maybe getting settled outside of court, and it all just simmering down a bit, and just resolving it with a kind of a more professional, behind closed doors kind of way. Especially since this lawsuit has, it's got a lot of weight behind it. We've all seen it play out in the media. So, and Disney have been waiting to use this lawsuit. But they've waited till this very last minute, I would say. They've waited. They probably should have done this a little bit sooner, I would say. But they've waited pretty late on to do it. Okay, so with that being said, I've been Jack, you've been you, and I'll see you real soon.